Today we have Claudia St. We're very excited to have her speaking with us today. A little bit about Claudia. Claudia is the president of Affinity HR Group Incorporated, an HR and management consulting firm that provides HR compliance, recruiting, and organizational development support to small and mid-sized companies nationwide. Affinity HR Group is TLMI's and FTA's endorsed HR partner. Claudia is also the author of Transforming Teams, Tips for Improving Collaboration and Building Trust, #1 hot new release on Amazon. Love that. Claudia is a frequent public speaker, is often quoted in national and industry press, and is a regular contributor to numerous print and electronic publications on the topic of human resources. Claudia holds an undergraduate degree in employee benefits and labor relations from the American University and a master's degree in business and public administration from the George Washington University, and numerous HR and behavioral science certifications. So Claudia, with that, I think that's the last slide that I have. So if you're ready, welcome and take it away.
Well, thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, Emily. Thank you for slogging your way through that incredibly long and relatively boring bio. I think the important thing that I'd love for all of you to know is that I work a lot with TLMI and FTA in the print and print converter space, also in the print and promo space. So to be able to connect with women within that space is a special delight, because it's a very male-dominated space, as we all know. But to have the opportunity to talk about what's happening in the workforce today and what you can expect for 2023 and beyond from a female perspective really is a delight, and I'm just excited to have this opportunity. I'm going to go through a lot of content. I'm just going to kind of just hit you with a fire hose. Please ask questions. I believe those are being handled in the Q&A. So if you want to shoot some questions as we go along, I am happy to go through those. I'm going to save about 5 to 7 minutes at the end to go through those questions, or just if you have a comment or want to share a thought, anything that we can't address in the limited time that we've got today, I promise I'll follow up if we can get that information through the Q&A. I believe FTA will track that for us. So with that, I'm going to just get right into it and talk about good old Fed chair. So Jerome Powell's having a lot of heartache right now. And why do we care? Well, Jerome Powell is looking at the economy and has a lot of concern and wants to slow down what he sees as rampant inflation. And he's looking at two indicators. He's looking at two indicators primarily to use the one tool that he really has. And the tool that he has is interest rates. So he looks at this economy and says, there's a major problem going on because unemployment is too low and wage growth is too high. And so in order to address those two problems, he and the Fed have been increasing interest rates. There is a problem with that, and that is that those two indicators, the low unemployment rate and the high wage growth, are all part of the same trouble, which I'm not sure raising interest rates is going to affect. And here's what that means. So currently, we have persistent high unemployment rates, or low unemployment rates, not to confuse things. But we've been bumping along at around a 3.5 or less, 3.7, 3.5, 3.4, 3.5% unemployment rate for the entire year. Just to put this in context, a 4.2% unemployment rate is considered full employment. So we've been operating nationally at below full employment for really, we were dealing with this in 2019, 2020. COVID kind of turned things upside down and we're back at it again. And remember the law of averages. So this means that while the average is 3.5%, unemployment, that half of the data samples are below that. And if you are in Minnesota, you have around a 1.8% unemployment rate. And in fact, we just found out that under the Bloomberg News reported that 26 states have reached record low unemployment rates this year, record in all of the tracking of unemployment. So there's a very, very, very tight labor market out there. I know you know this because I know you're having a difficult time finding and keeping talent. And a lot of businesses are finding this. In fact, when we looked at the employment rate, there are 10.1 million job openings as we speak, and there are currently 5.8 million job seekers. So we have a difference of about 4 million jobs that are going to be are open right now. And when we look at projections from 2021 through 2031, it looks like we're going to be adding a total over all of that time, 8 million jobs. Well, we're already 4 million jobs in the hole. So we're having a really hard time filling these jobs. And the one question I get all of the time is, where do they all go? Well, there is a really sad fact, and that is that 8 million workers have left the workplace, of which about 4 million we don't expect to come back. Where did they go? Well, about 500,000 of those workers died as a result of COVID. We currently have about 1.6 million workers out with long-term COVID. We don't know when and if they're coming back. There's an estimated 18% of the workforce currently has some form of long COVID. These are very shocking statistics. I think you'll all agree. There are also 2 million retirees who left the workplace early because, I mean, why not? If you can financially, this is a tight and hard business environment to work in. So we lost 2 million workers that we weren't anticipating. We also have 2 million women who have left the workplace because of workplace balance issues or imbalance issues, which I know is a topic for today. One shocking statistic: if you have 3 children, toddler, newborn, and maybe a school-age child, the cost of providing childcare for that family of 3 is about $37,000 on average. So, you know, if you're making $55,000, $60,000 before tax, it doesn't really make sense to stay in the labor market. So we have this tremendous labor shortage, and we don't see it changing anytime soon. In addition to that, we have the Great Resignation, which is continuing. This is 4.1, 4.2, 4.3 million workers changing their jobs, quitting their jobs every single month. It is not going away. It is continuing. It's pervasive. So where are they all going? Well, McKinsey did a study to say, where did they all go? And currently, what's interesting is, of the folks that quit, of that 4.1 or 2 million people that quit every single month, 65% of them are leaving the industry altogether. So they're not just job hopping for other pay, although 35% are, but 17% of them are checking out altogether. Maybe they are relying on savings or retooling or going to work or just taking a mental health break. But 48% of those folks that are quitting are going to a completely different job, different industry altogether. A lot of this, if not most of this, is the result of COVID and also a lot of workplace pressure that have been in existence for decades, really. When we look at the labor participation rate, and I apologize, my slides are pixelated, and I just discovered this as we were getting on. So please, I know that these pixelated slides are not appealing, but I didn't know that until we got on. But, you know, the labor participation rate, if you pick up the newspaper, it's bouncing around and, you know, it looks okay. But if we look at the labor participation rate over time, we see that there's a huge drop since COVID, and that accounts for those 8 million people that are out of the workplace. And if we look at labor participation over time, we see that's been going down more and more and more. And labor participation is basically anyone age 16 years or older who would be actively involved in the workplace. And that labor participation rate is going down, partially because people are living longer and not working, but also because they're making different changes in employment. And when we look at employment, when Jerome Powell is looking at the labor force rate, what he sees is that, one of the problems looking forward within the next decade is that the birth rate is such that these are the millennials and these are the Gen Zs. This is the folks that are coming into the workplace. Millennials are in the workplace already. Gen Zs, the youngest of which is 10 years old. And so they're not far out from employment. And the birth rate after that is relatively diminished. We also have immigration that has really closed up. And so as a result, we don't have enough people climbing into the workforce to replace the retirees and those with COVID that are exiting the workforce. So what we have on our hands is a real tsunami. What this means for you, what this means for all employers, is that we need to realize that in this storm, we're not all in the same boat. We've all gone through a pretty major trauma, a pretty major storm, but each in our own boat, experiencing it very uniquely. And we need to be looking at each and every one of our employees, current and prospective, to say, what is it that they need? Where are they? And what we know about employees is they want, more than anything else, their work to matter. The most important thing for employees when you're hiring and when you're thinking about engaging and retaining them is to know that they want meaningful work. They want to know that what they do matters, that they work for a company that has a purpose. They get their own personal sense of purpose as a result of it. 9 out of 10 would trade money for having a work that was more meaningful. 70% out of Gen Z say that it's more important than pay, and that relationships are the most important component or determinant of meaningful work. So you don't have to be curing cancer, but the relationships that you have and the purpose that you have together matters. Women are facing an even more difficult challenge. When we look at women in the workplace, again, they are checking out at great numbers. One of them is that because they have a harder, headwinds when trying to grow in their careers. They are continuing to lag behind men in terms of career growth. They're overworked with both professional work and homework, and they're unrecognized for both of that effort. And that is exhausting. They are burned out at levels much higher than their male counterparts. What they want is a culture, a different kind of culture. And the culture that they want is flexibility, well-being, and diversity and inclusion. And this is all the result of a study that was done by McKinsey. It came out in September, which is really so interesting about what women want in the workplace. And women have been struggling in the workplace for a long time. This is the pipeline to leadership. So when we look at women leaders, we see that when they just entering the pipeline itself, white women account for 29%. Women in general account for 48% at entry-level positions. But by the time we get to the C-suite, they only represent 26%. And of that, only women of color are only at 5%. So as we work through growing and developing in our careers, we are losing. We're quitting, we're giving up, or we're not recognized or we're forced out. So that's an exhausting career picture for women, made worse by what's happening now as a result of COVID. And when we look at what they want, when we look at women leaders and women leaders under 30, we see that flexibility is the most important thing. For young women leaders in the workplace, it's almost 80%. It's more important than 80% of other facets. It's important to 80% of women surveyed, is what I was trying to say. Second only to the organization's commitment to well-being and opportunities for advancement. So these are not idle statistics. These are statistics wanted by most women in the workplace. And when we look at flexibility specifically, we see that women who have the opportunity to work where they want to work in a way that works for them are more happy. They're more likely to have less burnout. They're less likely to leave you than people who are not able to control their work environment. What this gets to, of course, is hybrid work and workplace flexibility. And all of the data show us that people feel more empowered, more productive when they're able to work a flexible work schedule that works for them than if they are forced to be in a work environment that works for their employer, irrespective of their own needs. There was a really interesting study that came out by Microsoft, and they studied, I think it was about 28 or 30,000 knowledge workers along this topic of hybrid workforce. And what they found was that 85% of managers felt that they weren't really comfortable and didn't really have a sense of whether or not their employees were being productive, whereas 87% of remote workers felt that they were working just fine, and only 12% of managers were certain that their workers were being productive. Despite the fact that when you look at economics, there is productivity in the workplace. We see that business is up, productivity is up, and yet there's this disconnect between what managers feel and how workers feel. And that's a huge issue for the workplace going forward. So in terms of strategies for flexible work, the most important thing for employers and managers to focus on is to prioritize well-being and care, making sure that you are checking in with each and every one of your workers. Because remember, we're all in our own boats. We are not in the same boat. We are experiencing different things at different times. That checking in, that prioritizing well-being in order to make sure if your employees are okay, they can give you their all. But if they're not okay, they can't, and it shouldn't be expected that they would. There is no one size fits all when it comes to flexibility. Some people, whether they're women or not, or men, they want to work part-time, they want to work frequently, they want to work infrequently, they want to work full-time in the office or full-time at home. There is no one answer. It depends on their boat. So find out what they want, ask them, get regular feedback from your employees to figure out what's working so that you craft a solution that works for you. And once you have that solution, clearly delineate and communicate the guidelines for what flex work is, for how you're going to maintain that flexible work environment for each and every one of your employees. Invest money and time and intention in improving communication at work. I've been asked for the last 3 years, how do we improve employee engagement at work? How do we maintain culture with a hybrid workforce? If there was an easy answer for you, I would give it, but there isn't. And this is the work of managers and leaders going forward. This is the hard work. This is what has to be done. And this tight labor market that we're dealing with right now, we're going to have for the rest of this decade. So figuring out how to invest in employee connection, whether it's technology, whether it's relationships, this is the work that employers need to do to attract employees and to keep the employees that they have. And if you are requiring in-person work, be purposeful. Why? Why is that? Is it just to maintain a connection? The slide that I just showed you with that leader supervisor overlooking the worker's shoulder, if you just want them in the office so that you can see them clicking away on their keyboard because you don't have a better way to assess their productivity, you need to revisit that, because all indications show that they are productive. Not everybody, doesn't work for everybody, and it can be a privilege and not a right, but being mindful about what is required for in work. Be dedicated to leveling the playing field, because there is a problem with presenteeism, where if you've got employees who are working in the office, we presume that they're more dedicated. We presume that they're more loyal. But in fact, people who work remotely oftentimes are giving more of themselves in order to prove that they are being productive. And finally, the most important thing is to train your managers and your supervisors. They are your first line of defense. Employees don't quit their jobs, they quit their managers. Unfortunately, in the United States, we don't view management training as a profession. It's a title, but not something that is in itself a job. And we should view it as such, because that is where employees are experiencing your workplace, your culture. That's their work environment. And if that's not solid, if your supervisors and your managers are not well trained to follow your lead and to create culture and maintain culture and treat employees with empathy, you will be swimming in that tsunami for the next 10 years to come. Finally, we are talking a lot about remote employees, but the needs for flexibility, the need for trust, the need for purpose exists whether your workers are working on a cement floor or on a carpeted floor, whether they're knowledge workers or production workers. These needs that people say they want regardless of whether or not they're working production or working from home. The challenge for you is to figure out how to bring them purpose, how to bring them trust and flexibility and respect. And if you have any questions about how to do that, the best person to ask is them, because they know what they want and what they need. Finally, well-being. The only thing I really want to emphasize here is that this is a challenge for all of us. I've started listening to a daily meditation first thing in the morning to ground myself and to give me the perspective that I need going forward, because some days are harder than others. Sometimes I'm having an okay day. Sometimes things are amazing. And sometimes, life is hard. And if I can demonstrate that for my workers, if I can demonstrate that for my team, if I can acknowledge some days are great and some days aren't, I'm here for you. I care about you. You need to take time off. We need to build a PTO for mental health days. We're going to do it so that we can all feel rested, so that if we are emotionally prepared for the day ahead, then we will be physically prepared to complete the obligations that the work requires of us. So with that, I'm going to leave you with my contact information. And please connect with me on LinkedIn, connect with me on email. If there are any questions I can do to help you with your workplace or with your own leadership skills or your own professional challenges, I would love to help in any way I can. I know I just really shot a fire hose at you of information. So maybe I can see if there are any questions or even just reflections on what you're going through and how you've managed to navigate the workplace with intention and try to reduce the imbalance. So Katie, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that was a lot of really good information. I had no idea about the after effects of COVID. I mean, obviously we all see some of that, but the numbers you shared were really kind
Terrifying.
of shocking to me. Yeah, terrifying, shocking, all of those things. I mean, and just to think that's not going to go away anytime soon. That's just going to be something we're going to have to face long term. And one of the things I was thinking about as I was listening was, I know you were mentioning where you got some of your information, and I guess I'm curious, is that a resource that's available just if someone is in HR or they're wanting to be more proactive to find out how to get some of that information? Because it sounds like it could be really useful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, first of all of the labor participation data is all from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So really looking at what's happening in the workforce. And of course, when we look at each individual state, that's going to vary what the employment numbers are. But the bottom line is, if you haven't increased your wages, you need to do that. But if you have done that, the rest of it is, how do we create workplace flexibility? How do we how do we give folks what they need moving forward? And I'm happy to share all of my statistics and data. I love to go and look and see what's happening in the workplace. I'm kind of a labor junkie. Well,
Yeah.
makes sense.
Well, I'm a statistics junkie, so I was like,
Oh, perfect.
ooh.
I can give anybody who wants, I can give them this slide deck and give them the sourcing information for
Yeah,
all of
sure.
this data.
So
Absolutely.
we did have some questions. One of them, suggestions for employee connection resources.
I think Slack and Teams and Zoom is important. I also think bringing people together in smaller virtual teams, bringing people together in person where possible. A lot of folks, once they kind of go virtual, they feel like they'll never bring people together again. And really, you're saving so much money on workplace rent and all of those things. Bringing them together for a weekend retreat is very important. And I also think checking in with your employees to see what they think, what works for them. And there is no one size fits all. It's just
Right.
trial and error.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's different for everyone. So let me see if there's any other questions.
I did get a question, actually. I delivered a similar presentation just a couple of days ago about how to maintain that your folks are productive when they're remote. And I'm going to stop my screen share. And I know that's the biggest challenge, I think, for a lot of folks, is really how to ensure that there is productivity. And the issue is that that's the job of managers and supervisors. It starts with a conversation with employees about how do we evaluate productivity? And if you don't have a way to do that, then that's the work, is to figure out what are productive outputs. How do we evaluate whether or not there is work being done? And if you can't evaluate that, then you got to wonder what you're doing with that position in the first place.
Yeah.
And then it's regular feedback and ongoing feedback. But the assumption that employees are not productive when they're at home is a false assumption. Not everybody is productive, but we wouldn't be killing it in terms of growth and productivity in the United States were it not for the fact that people are productive when they're at home. And so we just maybe have to bring that delta between employees think they're fine at 87%. They feel they're being productive, and only 12% of managers are certain of that. That's the work.
Interesting.
That's how you have to that's the work to bring that together in alignment.
Really interesting. Yeah, that's good advice. Well, we really are super grateful to you for coming and joining us, and some really good information. And as Emily mentioned before, this is recorded, so you can rewatch this, because like she said, it was a lot of information at one time. Go back through, maybe process it again, share with your team as needed. I know that would be helpful. Some of us are not in HR, but this is beneficial. We could share it with our team. And if you have any other questions, you can go back and watch the video, get Claudia's contact information, or you can reach out to the Women of Flexo. FTA will be happy to be sure you can get the video and have access to some of this information. So thank you.
I will be at the annual conference at Flexo in April, I believe.
Oh, good.
So I will be there, and hopefully you all will come and visit me and say hello and keep me company.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us again, and we will see you soon.